First, I would like to thank the very nice introduction from Joe. He's so kind. He set now the expectation bar so high. So Gemma and I, we will try to do our best to fulfill the expectation. The general topic is, in fact, a combination of two things: the global market access and profitability. Yeah, and it was very nice to bring Gemma and me together to have a talk on this. And I will try. We will play in a handshake game. Yeah. So I have topics which I will, let's say, touch from my side, and Gemma, as being so experienced in the real world, she will then give her real world examples to it. Yeah. So my name is Peter Hovel. I have to look it up at my slides. I'm working for TÜV Süd. We are the largest notified body worldwide, and my responsibility is that entire medical decertification business of our company. I will shortly tell you where we are coming from. We in fact exist thanks to James Watt. He kindly invented the high pressure steam machine, which unfortunately killed at one explosion thousands of workers in a factory at the same time. And it was a very famous man, by the way, the guy who implemented also the healthcare system in 1866 in Germany. His name was Otto von Bismarck, and he gave the German industry two options. Either you fix the problem, or we found a governmental organization to fix the problem for you. And you can imagine already at that time, they didn't like government. I know that from the United States as well. So 17,000 German companies funded the TÜV Süd Association. And meanwhile, we have 145 years of experience in engineering. We are very proud to be part of the term made in Germany. Yeah, we are usually market leader in those countries of high quality. And we have 22,000 experts worldwide, and 450 of them are purely medical. And with this, I would like to hand over to my very charming partner, Gemma, to introduce the Edwards part.
Thank you very much. I'm from Edward Life Sciences. I've been with Edwards now just a short 15 months period of time, but before then I was with other medical device companies. So what do I love about Edward Life Sciences? That we are the leaders in heart valve therapy and hemodynamic monitoring. We started in around 1958. We are the leaders. We are the first to design heart valves and heart valve technology, and we've maintained that innovation with our most exciting technology, which is the transcatheter heart valve for inoperable patients, where a heart valve is actually crimped into a catheter inserted through the femoral artery and then ballooned into the heart in a 45-minute surgery, which is really saving people's lives who would otherwise not survive longer than perhaps 12 months. So it is an outstanding technology. We have 8,500 employees with a manufacturing footprint globally, and we are certainly committed to the community, and Edwards does outstanding philanthropy work continually. And of course, even today with the tragedy in Nepal, Edwards has set up a fund for a relief fund in Nepal, as they do for all natural disasters. We also do heart valve therapy for patients who can otherwise not afford it all over the world, in remote parts of China and emerging markets as well. So what an outstanding company that I have joined. And we, like most other companies, we're selling in over 100 countries around the world. Thank you.
So the big question is how to gain profit by working with a notified body. Yeah. So the first easy thing is to save costs in a way to say, okay, who is the cheapest, who makes it quick and dirty, so who prints me the certificate for money? No. The game is over for this. Yeah. By the higher scrutiny that you see out there, and you saw the PIP breast implant disaster in Europe, the scrutiny over notified bodies is getting already now way higher. So we are going down from a number of 89 down to 62 meanwhile, and our guesstimate is that it will land somewhere at 40. The European Commission would like to go down to 20, but I think this is unrealistic. What is also important, what I would like to stress here in the US audience, the EU regulation is different and has a different philosophy than the US regulation. Yeah, and let's say the wishful thinking, I have fulfilled the one, then automatically I have fulfilled the other, is unfortunately not true. And it was very nice to listen to the presentation for the software standard 62304. There is, of course, since long a guidance from the FDA, and now people are starting to implement it, not because there are other mandatory parts inside, but because the FDA people are getting trained. Yeah, so that's just food for thought for this. So when we think about profits and working together with a notified body, what could we think about? Yeah, the one thing is to have a higher profit by a higher revenue. So what everybody tries to be is to first on the market, yeah, to get into the markets earlier, sell earlier, get by this the bigger share, and sell higher quality and quantity. And the other part in profits is, of course, to have lower costs. And if you think in the way of being compliant and safe, it's reduction of redesign costs, perhaps, which might be necessary in bad design, reduction of costs of bad quality, reduction of costs of recalls. So, in fact, the focus on regulatory immunity and also to use synergies, yeah, when you plan in an early stage how to enter the different markets. So, what you need as a partner is always somebody who has a global presence, know-how and competence, regulatory capabilities, and spectrum of service and predictability. So that's the first thought regarding profits. Then when the thoughts are on global market access, there are certain factors which are very important. Most of you, this is absolute common knowledge. The one is, of course, the regional market performance. Yeah, how interesting is the market from us? What is the regulatory barrier to enter the market, and what is the timeline for it? Now, one reason why, let's say, many startup companies try to go to EU first, even it's the smaller market than the US market, but it's usually the market to be entered quicker. Then the regional market trends, where is the medical device industry going in general? And reimbursement, yeah, that Gemma knows way more than I know, so that's why I graded out. And out of this, yeah, there should be, in fact, a decision on to which market to go first. And you see that, in fact, in a modern company, and Gemma will say something about it, commercial aspects and regulatory aspects go hand in hand. Yeah, a business plan without the regulatory part is not worth the paper it's written on. So I would like now to give you an overview about general market trends. We heard already a little bit about it, just to have a summary, where are we walking to? What will be in the near future? Yeah, my organization for this purpose has a scientific advisory board. Yeah, we have high-level scientists from high-level German universities and hospitals in there. And the goal of this is to understand the consequence of future treatment and to have a basis for the own strategy for TÜV Süd. Yeah, which safety knowledge do we need in future, or which safety knowledge do we need to develop? Yeah, we are part in many standardization committees. Yeah, it was very nice to meet Leo here, who knows also our people from the standardization committee. Yeah, and we need to identify the new risks. Yeah, there are so many new innovations out there where the regulators are totally unprepared, and they often start to discuss, is this now a pharmaceutical product or a medical device? But the right discussion is how to make these things safe. Then to have a clinical network and also to get an independent scientific opinion, because often there are regulators, yeah, for us it's usually BfArM or ZLG, who is doubting that our decision is right, and we have an independent scientific board who would say, look, this is the way how it is, and we support either the opinion or we don't support it. Yeah, but at least you will get a really actual, contemporary answer to a safety-related question. So, what are the market trends? The one is the mobile health. Yeah, you will perhaps already made experience with this. One big driver will be the companies who have usually a contract with the health insurance and they wouldn't like to pay so much, so they're very interested that people will take care about their health. So using these mobile health devices to stay fit and perhaps to create less costs at doctors. The others is moving beyond wrist implantables, yeah, so there is much more than the watch that you carry with you that will be in future relevant. It goes also, let's say, that perhaps devices in future could be implantable and so forth. Then it is said that 2015 will be the last year of the one-fits-all device, yeah. So those devices which are, we will go into micro-segmentation, yeah, with a huge patient adaptability. So that's absolutely a future trend. And also miniaturization and vanishing devices. Yeah, that's where the future absolutely goes through. You have heard about pill cam, you have heard about resorbable stents. Yeah, that's also a very important trend. The other is 3D bioprinting, yeah, which is really interesting. This is perhaps one of the big challenges for the regulators where they're arguing what is it, instead of really working on how to make that safe, because it's already happening. The other thing is big data. We heard already yesterday in the keynote about it. And the very important thing is that we will collect a lot of implicit knowledge and make that implicit knowledge explicit knowledge. So there are also the big questions how to deal with that somebody who is a machine will decide for us. And of course the genome project and the engineering which comes with it. And last but not least, xenomorphic implants. Where you will use perhaps a porcine pancreas or some cells in a Gore-Tex environment being implanted and act as your lost pancreas. So these are the trends, and what is very important at these trends, if there is no regulatory strategy to put them on the market, it will be just a technical feasibility study. And as we are all sitting here, we all know to make something technically feasible is far away from making it a medical device. Because the amount of effort is perhaps 5- or 6-fold than to make the technical feasibility. So, and the other thing is, how will the markets perform in future? For this, we have a whole global market access and regulatory affairs department. Who is usually monitoring the development of regulations, of the market performance, preparing us as an organization. So if there is a market opening for third parties like us, that we would step in as first, and to offer worldwide certification for customers. So everything that we can offer with the service that you take from us, we would like to bring it to as much as possible markets. And to evaluate regulatory strategies, especially for the small companies who are new to that. We are in touch with, in fact, nearly every regulator worldwide, not every, but let's say with the major ones. And we know what is clever and what is not clever to do with them. So we help also with the regulatory strategy of these. So if you look how the markets will develop until 2018, you will observe that, let's say, the significance of the American market will stay as it is, but you will see very much growing the Asian part. This is just all 100%. That's why the bar is the same. If you look at it like in the growing billions, then you see that all markets are growing, but really over proportionally, it's the Asian market. If you want to talk about, let's say, the BRIC countries, we have also clear analysis about that, but you can find me later outside because this is a whole topic for 2 hours presentation. So we localized our offices globally in those markets where we think it's very interesting for us as TÜV Süd, but also for our clients to export their products to, and where we as a third party can do that. And this is way more than CE marking. So many companies don't know when you go for CE marking. If you start to talk with us in an early state, it's many more markets which we can open with little add-ons using our network. So, and with this, I would like to give over again to Gemma, because the dilemma of these big markets is really hitting her, of course, at most.
All right. So what I'd like to do now is just give you a little bit of background. So what is the background story to going into the international markets? If we look at the mature markets in the blue there in population, you can see that that population, if you like, comprises about 13% of the world's total population, yet they consume more than 76% of the world's medical devices. Conversely, if you look at the BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, Indonesia and China, it makes up around 50% of the world's population, and yet historically they've only consumed about 4.5% of medical devices globally. And so what does this really mean for us as international companies, and how did this come about, and why is it interesting? So one of the things that's happened in the last 10 years is that we've seen the demand in these emerging markets growing. And we've seen them growing for several reasons. Increasing government health expenditure, increasing private health insurance, rising incomes and ageing populations. But what happened in that global financial crisis that we all knew about in around 2008, we suddenly started looking at these markets, and as Peter just said, we're looking at the US markets remaining flat, and in some segments they're going negative. And so suddenly these countries where I would call them opportunistic for many companies suddenly became interesting, a market area to grow. And so we've had the mature markets down and the developing markets certainly going up with the financial crisis. So if we take that in mind, what does that really look like in the whole world? If we look at the world, the United Nations recognises around 130, well, not around, exactly 133 countries around the world, of which today approximately 106 are regulated. If we look at most mid to large size companies, they are selling in over 100 countries, and on estimate, around 60% of those are currently regulated, which means obviously around 40% are not. And so how many licenses do the most mid-sized companies have? At least around 1,000 product registration certificates. So that means that we're already in market in these countries, and we've seen a rapid change now in regulations being driven by the fact that companies are now pushing product into the emerging markets in countries that were previously unregulated, and so now we want to maintain market share, but they're going to become regulated. And we've seen that with Malaysia, and we've seen it in smaller pockets such as countries like Bangladesh, and we're already selling in those countries. How do we retain sales in those countries and yet resource those markets to put the registrations in? So we might be selling in a wide variety of products, but the cost of registering those products now becomes very extreme, and we might have just smaller revenue values in those markets around maybe $250,000 or $500,000, and now the cost of registering that can be easily exceed that amount of money. So what is the strategy there for going forward? Are we going to withdraw from those markets, or are we going to invest in those markets, register those products? And if we do, what is the growth plan there? So the future, of course, is greater complexity, more regulated countries, longer approval times, and more requirements. And none of this is news to anybody. And who's going to do those negotiations with the health authorities? So I'm going to hand back at the moment to Peter.
Thank you, Gemma, very much. So, perhaps two thoughts more on the global markets. What I heard about is, let's say, that the established markets, there, let's say, those many devices which were a novelty 10 years ago, are becoming a commodity, and the cost pressure, on the prices is getting really big, So it starts to be also, in addition, to be very interesting to participate in this extreme market growth that you will see in India, for example, where the government achieved for the pharmaceutical industry such a success that 80% of the generics on the US markets are coming from India meanwhile, and the same team is now working on the medical device regulation, because they would like to replicate that, and the market is supposed to grow with 20%. And if you look at China, who is now gaining its own competence, and starting to be a competitor to global companies at 20 to 30% lower prices. So these are very interesting and very dynamic trends that we are observing. So another way, let's say, to get a quick market access with a high quality, what else can you do? And there is one very simple statement: fail early, fail cheap, and learn. And this is something, and Gemma will say something about that too, which is highly important. Many times somebody starts to work with regulators or whosoever together at the end of all the development. And it's really important to reconsider this, whether this is really very clever. So if you this is a very simplified life cycle process, starting with the idea and ending with the market phase. So in the classical field, when somebody would start to talk with somebody who would give us market approval, would be at the end of the development of the product. And this is two severe consequences. The one is the costs of a change is very high. That's why, let's say, companies would rather like to go into a dispute with whosoever the regulator is, rather than to fix the problem. So this is already something which is an issue for safety. And the other issue is, of course, the timing of the market access, because any dispute costs, of course, a lot of time. It's way more clever to do that earlier. Here in the United States, the FDA is doing the pre-submission meetings, where you can discuss the concepts. With a notified body, you can do the same. And we have, in fact, a high number of very developed services as pre-certification services that you can do, yeah. And there are several really very costly things, yeah, which with a simple review, yeah, can spare a lot of money. Imagine a clinical study, yeah, where the setup is not done in a way that the likelihood that you will get significant data is high. Yeah, usually you spend millions of dollars for that, and a review which is done within 1 day, yeah, will tell you whether you are on the right track or the money is not spent well. Same with the regulatory strategy. As I said before, yeah, there is way more what a notified body can do than just a European market access. Yeah, if you talk with a notified body early enough, yeah, then certain things, and it's just little deltas that can be prepared, at least that you have already the market access permit. Yeah, the reimbursement story is a different one. Yeah, and if you are developing electronic devices with software microprocessors, you don't need to have the prototype yet. The electronic schemes, yeah, the software concepts already running on emulators are sufficient to do as a really good design review and to get the biggest traps out of it. So you can spare a lot of money by failing early, by learning to it. Yeah, many R&D teams need to go through these failures to learn also the safety principles that are necessary. So that's very, very good invested money to start these kind of investigations early. Yeah, okay, I made this, and with this I would like to hand over to Jim.
Thank you very much. So before I talk about just this slide, I think one of the important points that Peter raised about failing early and failing cheaply. And so I think one of the key things is we talk about new product development. At what point are we going to consider the other markets? You know, typically these products have been developed, you know, with the purposes of the US and EU as our key financial drivers, and yet now we're moving into these emerging markets. How do we accommodate those? And, you know, of course, China is one of the prime examples that we develop a product, we've got all the testing reports that we need for the US markets, and then we try to enter the China market, and they have the Chinese standards, and suddenly we don't have a particular test, like a cytotoxicity test, and the whole process of registration has begun. So it's about coming back to the beginning and saying, what else do I need? Where else do I want to be? And I apologise for any marketing people in the room when I say this, that when we ask marketing, where do you want to sell? And they will say everywhere. But what we really want to do is we need to know what are the key markets that the marketing people need to be in, so that we can do that early assessment and say, in order to be in these other key markets, this is what we're going to need. Now, we may make a decision not to proceed with those tests immediately so that we're not holding up our key markets. However, we're coming in prepared with a plan, not a wait and see once we've submitted those products. And I'll give you another example of just failing to do that early assessment of a product that, and here's an example of one, of a hyaluronic acid injectable into the knee in another company that I know about, which was manufactured as a medical device, and it's to expand the synovial fluid in the knee space. But in some countries it was regulated as a drug, and so they went out and tried to register this product globally in many, many markets, and got to the point where they were nearly completed in some countries to be asked by the regulator, give me these sterility methods for this as a drug. Well, that's a little like water all around and nothing to drink, because it was manufactured as a medical device and it's not available. Huge amounts of resources over at least a 2-year time frame in multiple geographies, rather than doing that very simple assessment. How is this product being classified by the regulators? And another, I think, misunderstanding is that because some of these, our emerging markets, have less mature regulatory systems, that we can go in and demand from them, or that we can negotiate that they change their regulations, and this is not correct, and it's not useful to say this is acceptable in the US and also in the EU, and therefore it should be acceptable in your market. So we have to do those early negotiations. So moving on from that point, how do we plan our regulatory resources? And we go back to the fact that we've got this 1,000 product registrations. On some benchmarking exercises done, what you will find is that if you have about 1,000 certificates, typically 70% of those resources will go into what I would call stay in market. In other words, renewal certificates, modifications to the certificates and change controls, and around 30% going into market access, putting new product into market. And this is where it becomes very critical. When we decide to put a new product into market, it goes in, I would call that in a healthcare system way, I would call that incidence, and it eventually goes into the prevalence bucket, which is the 70%. It means it has to be maintained. And so every time we hire a new regulatory person, 70% of their resource will go into staying in market. So it's about how do we ensure that we have appropriate plans, that we're not just doing the let's register it everywhere, rather than having a strategic plan to manage that. And as we're growing into these emerging market countries, that becomes a very critical factor. And so we need to have some, as Peter said, very strong business plans, and most importantly, I think, internal controls where we don't just have individuals saying to a regulatory person, I'd like you to register this product in my market, but rather having centralised control, internal processes where there is a marketing, an approved business plan, and a partnership with regulatory to put it into a workflow, and that it's tightly controlled. So it's about governance and management and having those systems that we need. And for me, that actually means having a centralised tracking database. I think, speaking with a number of different companies, there is software that's out there available, but the question is, for those companies that have that type of portfolio, is there a centralised tracking? Do we know where every single product registration is in every single market, when it's going to be renewed, and copies of those certificates? So to be global now, and we move from being US-centric and EU-centric to being global, and it means understanding our risks and rewards and the complexity of the environment and having all of those controls in place. And how do we manage those internal and external partnerships in order to ensure that we are in compliance and that we can stay both in market and get new market access? So I'm going to stand back to Peter now.
Thank you, Gemma. So the next step in order to, let's say, be more profitable or lower in cost is to use regulatory synergies. Yeah, the one is, let's say, with the CE mark plus Delta, you can get already quite far, but there are other things in addition which you should know. And when you look at harmonization, what is going on, GHTF was in the past the organization to drive harmonization. Now it's IMDRF. The difference is that unfortunately the industry was, let's say, put on the opposite side of the doors. And there are two results which are quite significant. The one is in fact finished and the other is in development. The one is the medical device single audit program. So even you cannot comply completely with your product application with every country, you can do certain activities which would be done only once but would already satisfy requirements of many countries. So we have in the committee of IMDRF, Australia, Brazil, Canada, China, Europe, Japan, and the United States of America. And those who I printed in bold, they committed to accept MD sub audits as the only audits representing their regulation. Yeah, it's at the moment running in a trial phase. The FDA has committed that there will be no FDA audits for those companies who receive an MD sub audit. So to those, let's say, big manufacturers, I know everybody doesn't trust so well the FDA, but for those who would like to take the advantage of this, the recommendation to the big players is many facilities take one which you think is really super, yeah, and make your experience there and then take your conclusion whether you would like to roll it out somewhere else. Because it helps you then in Brazil, in the United States, in Canada, and in Australia. Yeah? So you will then not receive random meetings from their auditors, but you will have one MD sub audit, with one audit report which would be public to these regulators. The other thing which is important to know is that IMDRF is working on the regulated product submission. When you look on the webpage, this project looks like a little bit sleeping, but it might awake quite quickly, and the reason is the TTIP contract between Europe and the United States. And I can just tell you at the moment what the outlook of this is. It's not like that you would have FDA approval, automatically you have EC approval. So I think both Europe and United States don't want to stay back to have their own regulators for this. But what will happen is they will agree, most likely EU will jump on the MD sub program also, so it would be then bold on this picture that they would accept the MD sub audits as well. And both organizations would harmonize the requirements on the product submission files. Doesn't mean that, let's say, you send only one file to one regulator, but you send one file to two regulators and it will be the same file. So if the TTIP comes, that's the most likely thing to happen, when you think about capitalizing on global harmonization. And Japan is also very serious involved in that program. They are really active partners. So you've seen they opened already, let's say, the Class 2 device business in 2004 for the third parties. Now the first Class 3 devices went also to third parties. So in the Class 3 device area, it starts to be a competition between so-called registered certification bodies and RCBs, and the next, between PMDA and them. And the next step most likely will be that there will be this MD sub audit also acceptable in Japan. That's also quite likely to happen within the next 3 years. With this I would like to give back to Gemma, to the complexity of global markets.
Thank you, Peter. So for me, it's also about understanding what is the structure of the company, and very few companies, unless they're rather smaller, but even so it may be true, there's a commercial, what I would call a commercial versus a regulatory model. In some countries, at Edwards, for example, we have exclusively direct sales, in which case we would have in-house RA doing it, so Edwards staff doing the registrations. In some countries where we have a smaller presence, we may also need to have a regulatory agent. There are also exclusively indirect sales via distributors, and therefore we have distributors doing the registrations with their own staff, or they may have them. They may have agent consultants doing that. And my question is, what is our due diligence? So we're now third party removed, and we're handing over dossiers to those individuals, either to the distributor, who then passes them on to the consultant. Do we really know what was submitted in market, the same dossier that we gave to them, and what due diligence have we done on those third parties to ensure that we have compliance? And then, of course, there's hybrid models where we have both direct and indirect sales, and this is true of many companies. And we may have in-house RA, which means Edwards staff, or we still may have distributors or agent consultants doing this. And so this represents a complexity of how we ensure that we have full transparency and compliance. And of course, in some countries, there is no company presence. There's no representative there's no representative office or legal entity, in which case in many countries that means that the manufacturer doesn't own the license. That license will be owned by the distributor. And examples of that might include countries like Indonesia, for example, where the distributor would have the license in their own name. And what sort of liability does that create for the parent company? And if we wanted to own those licenses ourselves, what would that actually take? And therefore we need these comprehensive management systems and governance systems where we have this global database of all of our registrations, and we know for every single license who is the legal holder of that license and who is the legal importer. And quite often they are different. So in order to give us this visibility and transparency, and as I said, compliance and liability. And with that, what I'd like to talk about is control of what I would call across the commercial ecosystem. And how do we have these global systems in place? And if I go back to we go back to pre-2008, many of the systems and global SOPs that we have were developed for our US and EU markets, and now we're paying attention to these international markets, and what we can see is that quite often those systems and processes were in fact not well designed to incorporate and include the international markets, and we can find it at every single level of our business. So how do we build that infrastructure? And this is where I think a lot of companies are at the moment, is building what I would call that infrastructure to support those international markets, which have been historically opportunistic, not driving a lot of revenue, therefore strategically under-resourced, and we've left these markets in many cases, many companies to, if you like, find their own solutions, and sometimes those solutions haven't necessarily been what the company would have liked, so we need to put in the people and the processes and the systems. What do we know? Looking at the commercial versus the regulatory models in each country, what are the people and what are the people that we need in there, and how do we control that? What are the processes and what are the systems? And then we need to integrate that across the commercial, technical, IT and legal systems for these international markets in order to both maintain compliance, but also to really focus on excellence and driving these markets for the future. And so we have to come to another decision, and that is versus in-house versus outsourcing, because we can't necessarily do it all ourselves. And with that, globalisation really means we have to change the way we think about doing things for the future, change our business models, our traditional models, through business, technology and regulatory. Thank you, and I'll hand back over to Peter now.
So we saw that we have just 10 minutes, and we can assure you we are ready way earlier. This is, in fact, just a short summary. Yeah. So we try to have a view on, let's say, global market access, also, let's say, connected to efficiency, and that there are many factors to look at, yeah, when to access which market and when to start with it. Yeah. And we would like to hand over to you really the fail early, fail cheap, and learn, yeah, and with this to be prepared in time for the markets where you really want to go, that you get your profits and sales in time. Yeah, last but not least, in this global complexity, you can imagine how many times regulators somewhere, be it Egypt, will ask, for example, us as a certifier, whether what you as manufacturer are doing with our certificate is really right, whether it's genuine and stuff. Yeah, so there is a lot of work after you receive your audit, you get your product certification, in order to create a documentation which will protect that certificate. And that's really a big bunch of work which is not so well understood, where we are starting to create the awareness that there are out there, how many countries you said, 106 regulated?
106 regulated, exactly.
Yeah. And you can imagine that we get from all 106 questions. Yeah. So we want to be the partner where anything that happens, yeah, will not disrupt your business. And with this, we would like to say thank you. Yeah, if you have questions, I have my team here, Katie Lundstedt and Mick Santiago. We have our booth out there. If you have questions, I will stand there. And perhaps I will hand over to you also for your last words to the audience.
Thank you very much, Peter. So just the very final word, and that is, for me, it's really about being practical. It's about nuts and bolts. It's not rocket science. It's about centralising our resources, centralising our systems and processes to manage and govern our international markets. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I could tell you that after the last time I heard them speak, I got more, can I get Gemma's contact information than anything else? So thank you very much. Peter, you were great as well. I have a question on behalf of the people in TV land, because this comes to me a lot through the group. And that is, it really doesn't matter where their first country of operation is. When they start thinking about, you know, it was a long enough road. It was raising enough capital to make it work in country one. When I start thinking about expansion into other markets, what's the most intelligent way to start that process? Should I go one, country at a time? Should I look at the European Union as an entity? Should I look at, so perhaps if you can address that broadly, how do you go from one market to thinking about expansion globally? And thank you.
Okay, so I have a very simplistic way of thinking. So for me, the way I would go about that is to really start with saying, where do I want to be? So Peter talked about doing the research and understanding the regional trends and the market trends in those countries. So it comes back to is a lot about the marketing strategy, understanding what that marketing strategy is, and having looked at that. For me as a regulatory affairs person, is to sit down and do an assessment of those markets, how to get into those markets. So come back and look at, well, do I want to be in let's say, India and China? And then coming back, do I have presence in those countries and I want to be in those countries? What does it take from a resource perspective to get into that country? So I've identified my 5 key countries. I've done my regulatory assessment. I think that maybe I've got all the tests and I've got all the documentation that I need for the dossier. My next step is then, how do I identify a regulatory agent? And that's a key activity which I haven't talked about, and that is that
Would you touch upon it?
How about regulatory agents? One of the key things I think is to have a very early investigation into the market on how you're going to do product registrations, even if you're not going to do it yourself, or you're going to have problems. So, of course, we can go to the big companies like Emergo Group, and that's fine, but maybe you're not resourced to do that. So it's about getting some research in there and identifying a few regulatory agents, doing due diligence on them, understanding what their capability is, and then getting the non-disclosure agreement so that, first of all, when I start to get into the market, I know who I'm going to go to. Number 2, when I have problems, I've got at least 1 or 2 regulatory consultants or legal or internal, or external legal life sciences that I can go to, and that's something that I do. So, for example, if I'm talking about Brazil, the first thing if I'm doing, and I've been through this exercise before, first, number 1, I need to find myself a regulatory agent down there that's trustworthy, do the due diligence, identify a legal consultant down there, because those two often work together in Brazil, and have them ready to go. And the same as in India and in the other countries, say for example in Russia where there's problems, knowing who I'm going to go to get that work done. And that takes a lot of research actually, and doing telephone interviews, because we can't just fly over there. So I've spent a lot of time doing that, telephone interviews, and then getting that all centralised, and then go from there. So that's just at the ground level. That's the practicalities of it.
Do you have anything to add to that, Peter?
Perhaps I would like to speak up for the investors and the startup companies. Yeah, because for them, perhaps the situation and the answers are different. Yeah, to be in the nice situation to have enough money to prepare for Indian registration and Chinese registration, these companies would not have. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there the question is always, and the first question is always, do I get reimbursement? That's of course always the first question. And the other question is, where do I get, let's say, easiest market access and the sufficient volume? Yeah, mm-hmm. Which in the past for sure, and it depends also on the devices. Yeah, was the European market, yeah, which is not as big as the United States, but you can be there first. And it depends also, when do you want to sell your company? How much breadth do you have? Yeah, to have EC clearance, but to have FDA clearance as well. That increases, of course, the value of the company. Yeah, so I think there is not the answer to that question, but there are simply different perspectives how big and how globalized your company is.
I have a follow-up question for you, please. Being in your business, you have plenty of proactive clients that find you under very good, calm waters and help us through a process, and then you get emergency calls that say, the house is on fire, we need a lot of help. Could you tell us perhaps what maybe 1 or 2 of the more common, we need you right now, we have a big problem situations are, and what might they have done differently to have avoided getting into that situation?
We do have, in cases where, let's say, the class 2 A and B devices, where you don't need to do the individual product approval. Yeah, it happens that there are recalls in whatsoever country. Yeah, And if it's one of the big countries, independent whether it's in Europe or somewhere else, it will land on our plate. Yeah? And regulators are meanwhile talking with each other. And that's where our documentation is necessary, and that's sometimes also when we discuss with the manufacturer and then we do an audit there, yeah, simply to create evidence. What we observe at the moment, yeah, which is alerting us, is the French government, yeah, is doing audits with companies and creating a self-fulfilling prophecy, yeah. So we saw several non-compliances where we could not find an evidence for that. And that was partly with our clients, yeah. So that are the cases where we have emergent reaction, yeah, which is either to do directly an audit, and the other thing is we do have the documentation of our product reviews, yeah, which is really very extensive, yeah, which we then use in order to challenge the opinion of the other party.
Okay.
Yeah, and let's say how to prepare for this. It's the same story. Yeah, even let's say something doesn't necessitate somebody independent to look at. Yeah, it might be clever to do it. Yeah, at least so long until you are sure that the own R&D department, the quality department has enough experience and competence. Yeah, to be so good that the level of regulatory immunity is high enough.
Thank you. Rick has a question, and then we'll conclude.
Thank you. It seems like there's a lot of support to get through the regulatory issues. Are you aware of, does your company or do any other companies provide support about actually getting reimbursed? Because it seems like once we got our CE mark, but we didn't anticipate how much difficulty there is in actually getting the product into all the different healthcare reimbursement systems.
My company, definitively not. Okay. Yeah, we are looking from a bird's perspective on reimbursement. Yeah, because our mission is a different one. But perhaps Gemma can tell you a little bit about their reimbursement strategies.
Well, in fact, actually, I don't really get too involved in the reimbursement strategies, to be perfectly honest. However, what I think is a good idea is that's where I think as a smaller company in particular, again, I think it's about your network and getting smaller consultants to do that. And there's quite a few of them around, and that's actually the strategy that I would go through, is actually to get a consultant to help me through that process. There is one comment I'd like to make, and that is we're talking about market access, and the other question is about staying in market access. And to share with you, I think one of the areas that I'm seeing a lot of difficulties, and that is once we're in market, and that is the supply chain and product getting blocked in countries. So for example, you know, India wanting date of manufacturer, China wanting date of manufacturer, and now we've got, you know, countries like Vietnam, which always had that regulation, and then all of a sudden they decide, you know what, they haven't enforced it, and then today it's now enforceable, and countries and companies are finding their product impounded. And I think we've seen a lot of that, and that's another area to be very careful about, and that is customs, product getting blocked at customs because we've not met customs regulations which have existed but were not necessarily well enforced.
Okay, thank you.